It started on a quiet evening. The soft hum of cooling fans filled the dimly lit room as Kael's fingers danced across the keyboard. He was locked in an intense battle, his character weaving between laser blasts in the final level of Cyber Wars 3000. His screen flashed with explosions, his health bar dangerously low. He clenched his jaw, his focus narrowing. One last move. With a swift keystroke, he launched his final attack, a perfectly timed energy strike. The enemy flagship erupted in a burst of neon light, and the words, "Mission complete," blazed across the screen. Kael leaned back, exhaling sharply. But instead of satisfaction, he felt frustration. His rig had barely handled the fight. The frame rate had dipped, the visuals stuttered in the heat of battle. Cyber Wars 3000 was already outdated, and if his system couldn't handle it now, the next-gen titles coming out soon would be impossible to play. His eyes drifted to a web page still open on his second monitor, an ad for the GeForce RTX 5090. A beast of a GPU. Unmatched processing power, ray tracing so realistic it blurred the line between games and reality. The holy grail of graphics cards. But completely out of reach. He sighed, closing the tab. If only I had the RTX 5090. Then, his screen flickered. At first, he thought it was a glitch, but then his entire room dimmed. The air around him grew heavy, charged with an invisible current. His speakers emitted a strange rhythmic hum, almost like a whisper just beyond the edge of hearing. A soft blue glow filled the space. The glow intensified, not from his monitor, but from behind him. Kael turned, his pulse spiking. A figure stepped out of thin air. Tall. Ethereal. Not human. Her skin gleamed in shades of violet, shifting slightly as if infused with stardust. Her silver-blue hair floated weightlessly, as if unaffected by gravity. Most striking of all were her golden eyes, glowing softly as they locked onto his. They weren't just looking at him, they were reading him, understanding him in ways no one ever had. Kael swallowed hard, every muscle in his body frozen. Then she spoke. Kael of Earth. Her voice was smooth like a melody, each word carrying an almost hypnotic resonance. He felt his breath hitch. What? She took a slow step forward, the light around her shifting. I have traveled across the stars to meet you. Kael's thoughts scrambled for logic, for any explanation. He glanced at his energy drink. Was he hallucinating? Did he pass out at his desk? But the warmth of her presence was undeniable. The charged air prickled against his skin, as real as the chair he was sitting in. Who are you? He stammered, barely able to form the words. The woman's lips curled into a small, knowing smile. My name is Elia. She lifted a hand, and for the first time, Kael noticed she was holding something behind her back. A sleek, black and neon box. His breath caught in his throat as she slowly revealed it. The unmistakable logo. The signature angular design. The GeForce RTX 5090. Kael's jaw dropped. Kael reached out, his fingers hovering just above the sleek black and neon box. The GeForce RTX 5090. His mind struggled to process the situation. This was impossible. Is this real? His voice barely rose above a whisper. Ilya chuckled, a soft, melodic sound. Of course. This is the most powerful GPU in the universe. She tilted her head slightly, golden eyes glimmering. And it's yours. Kael's heart pounded. This had to be some kind of elaborate prank. Or a dream. Or maybe he had finally lost his mind after too many all-night gaming marathons. But why? His fingers curled, resisting the overwhelming urge to snatch the box from her hands. Ilya's expression softened, the glow in her eyes shifting from unreadable intensity to something almost fond. Because I've been watching you. Kael felt his face heat up. Watching me? She nodded, stepping closer, the air around her shimmering with an otherworldly energy. Your gaming skills have reached the farthest corners of the galaxy. My people, the Velmorian Empire, value warriors of both mind and reflex. And you, Kael, are one of the finest. Kael blinked. The Velmorian. Empire? Aelia gave him a teasing smirk. A federation of advanced civilizations across the stars. We are not so different from your world. She gestured at his gaming setup. You conquer battlefields, navigate complex strategies, react with inhuman speed. She paused. We do the same, but on a much grander scale. Kael swallowed hard. So, you're an alien gamer? Aelia's lips curled. Something like that. She extended the RTX 5090 toward him, the soft blue glow of her energy field illuminating the metallic GeForce RTX letters on the box. Kael's fingers trembled as he finally grasped the box. It was cold, real. Not a dream, not a hallucination. The weight of it sent a shiver down his spine. This was happening. He lifted his gaze to Aelia. What's the catch? She laughed, the sound like chimes in the wind. Smart, she mused. You do not trust gifts without price. Her expression turned serious. But this is no trick. I offer you this because I need you, Kael. His pulse quickened. Need me for what? Aelia's glowing eyes darkened slightly, a shadow passing over her elegant features. There is a war coming. Kael's breath caught in his throat. Aelia continued, her voice low, urgent. The Velmorian Empire is under threat from the Draken Dominion, a race of cybernetic warriors who seek to control all advanced technology in the universe. She stepped closer, the warmth of her presence nearly tangible now. We need warriors with unparalleled reflexes, tactical brilliance, and precision. The kind of warriors who can think in milliseconds, who can adapt under pressure, who can play at the highest level. Kael's fingers tightened around the RTX 5090. You want me to fight? He asked slowly. Aelia's golden eyes burned with determination. Yes. Kael exhaled, staring down at the graphics card in his hands. This wasn't just a GPU, this was a test. A challenge. Aelia's voice softened. This will unlock your full potential. But the choice is yours. For the first time in his life, Kael wasn't just playing a game. This time, the stakes were real. Kael turned the RTX 5090 over in his hands, its polished surface gleaming under the neon lights of his gaming setup. His mind still struggled to process what was happening. A literal alien, an impossibly beautiful one at that, had just materialized in his room, claiming she had traveled across the galaxy to find him. And now, she was offering him the ultimate upgrade. But there was more to it. He lifted his gaze to Aelia, curiosity burning inside him. So, you traveled across the galaxy just to give me this? Aelia took a slow step forward, her silver bodysuit shimmering as it caught the soft glow of his monitors. Her presence was almost hypnotic, an ethereal mix of grace and unspoken power. Not just that, she murmured. With a flick of her fingers, the air around them shifted. A pulse of blue energy crackled through the room, and suddenly, reality warped. Kael gasped as his entire setup transformed. His old, cluttered gaming desk dissolved into sleek, floating panels of alien metal. His chair melted away, replaced by a hovering battle station. And right in front of him, a holographic battlefield unfolded, stretching across his room like a rift into another dimension. The arena was unlike anything he had ever seen. Towering metallic spires. A sky rippling with digital fire. Floating platforms that shimmered in and out of existence. It was like stepping into a next-gen game, except this wasn't just graphics. This was real. Aelia stood at the center, her golden eyes glowing with challenge. I challenge you, she said, her voice laced with excitement. If you win, I'll upgrade your entire gaming setup with technology from my world. You'll have processing power beyond anything Earth has ever known. Kael's breath caught in his throat. That was already insane. But then she leaned in slightly, her lips curving into a playful smirk. But if I win, her voice dipped into a silken whisper. You come with me to the stars. Kael swallowed hard. The room was silent, save for the hum of alien energy around them. He looked down at the RTX 5090 still clutched in his hands, feeling its weight. A piece of the future. A glimpse into something bigger than himself. Then he looked back at Aelia, her confident stance, the gleam of pure adrenaline in her eyes. She wanted a fight. And hell, so did he. A grin slowly spread across his face as he cracked his knuckles. "All right, alien girl," he said, stepping forward. "Game on!" Alia's golden eyes burned with fire. The battlefield roared to life. Kael tightened his grip on the controller, his palms slightly sweaty. His heart pounded in sync with the countdown timer flashing before his eyes. The neon rift Omega Arena finished rendering around them, an explosion of color and chaos. This wasn't just a game. Alia's alien technology had taken it beyond anything Kael had ever experienced. The battlefield was alive, platforms shifting beneath their feet, cosmic storms roaring across the horizon, and impossible enemies phasing in and out of existence. Across from him, Alia sat with effortless confidence, her golden eyes gleaming. "Remember," she teased, fingers flexing over her controller. "If you lose, you're coming with me." Kael smirked, though his pulse quickened. "We'll see about that." The countdown reached 0. Round 1, Survival Mode. The world around them erupted. Kael dashed forward, dodging a barrage of neon bullets from AI enemies that looked like cybernetic phantoms. Alia glided across the battlefield with inhuman precision, her every movement calculated, almost graceful. Enemies morphed and adapted in real time. Each wave was faster, stronger. Alia was flawless, weaving between attacks, countering with pinpoint accuracy. Kael gritted his teeth. He had played thousands of games, but this was different. The AI learned too quickly. His every move was anticipated. Just as a swarm of pulse drones locked onto him, he saw it, a glitch in the system, a 2-second vulnerability in their attack pattern. Instinct kicked in. He spun, taking them down with precise shots, explosions rippling across the battlefield. The scoreboard flashed. Kael overtook Alia's lead. She raised an eyebrow, impressed. Round 2, Cosmic Rush. Suddenly, gravity vanished. Kael floated, his body tumbling in weightlessness. The game had changed again, zero gravity combat. Alia launched forward with terrifying speed, using momentum shifts Kael didn't even know existed. He struggled to keep up, trying to calculate new movement mechanics on the fly. His mind raced. Think. Adapt. Then it hit him. He could use the gravitational pull of the moving platforms. He timed his jump perfectly, launching himself at twice the normal speed, landing just behind Alia. Before she could react, he tagged her with a gravity pulse bomb. Boom! Alia spun out of control. Kael grinned. Score tied. She laughed, the first real laugh he'd heard from her, a sound like music from another world. "You're better than I expected," she admitted, regaining control. "But let's see how you handle this." Final round, Duel of Legends. The battlefield dissolved, shifting into something primal. Kael and Alia stood face to face in an open void, weapons appearing in their hands. The game had stripped everything away, no AI, no objectives. Just them. One final duel. Alia twirled her energy blade, a playful yet deadly look in her eyes. "No more tricks. Just skill." Kael exhaled slowly. This was it. The ultimate test. He tightened his grip. Then, they clashed. Kael barely had time to catch his breath before the final results flashed across the screen. Winner, Kael. The neon battlefield dissolved around him, the digital world fading as reality took its place. His heart thundered in his chest. He had won. Across from him, Alia blinked, her golden eyes glowing with unreadable emotion. Then, she laughed. It wasn't the laugh of defeat, nor frustration. It was something else. Genuine amusement. Admiration. Kael exhaled, pushing his chair back. "Didn't expect that, did you?" Alia smirked, leaning forward on the desk. "I'll admit, Earthling, you surprised me." She lifted a hand, and with a flick of her fingers, the holographic interface reconstructed itself, replaying their battle in ghostly projections. She studied the footage like a scientist analyzing a new discovery. "Your reflexes are fast," she murmured, eyes narrowing. But it wasn't just speed that won you the match. Kael grinned. Nope. I read your patterns. Aelia leaned closer, resting her chin in her palm. That is rare. Kael wasn't sure if she meant for a human or for anyone in the galaxy. The prize, or the real challenge? He gestured to the RTX 5090 still sitting between them. So, does this mean I get the ultimate alien gaming setup upgrade? Aelia tilted her head, amusement flickering in her eyes. You did win, didn't you? She snapped her fingers. The room shifted. Kael's old gaming rig dissolved, pixel by pixel, replaced by an otherworldly system, floating monitors, a crystalline console humming with cosmic energy, a chair that looked like it had been designed for starship pilots. The RTX 5090 integrated itself seamlessly into the build, its glow pulsating like a living heart. Kael gawked. This is insane. Aelia chuckled. Consider it a taste. His head snapped up. Taste? Her gaze locked onto his, something mischievous, almost challenging in her expression. You beat me in one game, she said. But what about the Valmorian Grand Tournament? Kael blinked. The what now? Aelia leaned in, whispering like she was offering him a forbidden secret. A tournament held across the stars. Only the greatest players in the universe can enter. Real-time strategy, zero-gravity shooters, AI warfare, combat simulations beyond your wildest dreams. She grinned. I think you could win. Kael swallowed. This was insane. A galactic gaming championship? Against beings from across the universe? And yet, something inside him ignited. The thrill of the challenge. The chance to be more. Aelia stood, offering her hand. What do you say, Earthling? Kael looked at the RTX 5090, the otherworldly gaming setup, then back at the mysterious, beautiful alien challenger before him. His fingers curled into a fist. Then he grinned. Game on! Aelia stood before Kael, her golden eyes shimmering with something unreadable, something expectant. You're impressive, Kael, she said, her voice carrying an almost reverent tone. No wonder you caught the attention of my people. Kael smirked, still catching his breath from their legendary battle. So, does this mean I get my prize? She lifted a hand, and with a flick of her fingers, reality itself shifted. Kael's PC case morphed before his eyes, its edges sleek and angular, pulsing with alien circuitry that seemed alive. His monitor stretched into an ultra-wide holographic display, floating above his desk. The RTX 5090 hummed to life, its surface engraved with symbols glowing in a deep, cosmic blue. It wasn't just a graphics card anymore. It was something beyond Earth's technology. Kael's jaw dropped. This is custom enhanced, Aelia said, crossing her arms with a knowing smirk. Optimized with Valmorian quantum processing and Neuralink interface. No input lag. No latency. Your thoughts will guide your movements faster than any reflex could. Kael ran a hand through his hair. I don't even know how to thank you. Aelia stepped closer. You've earned it. Then, after a pause, she added, but there was another reward, remember? A choice beyond Earth. Kael's heart skipped a beat. She was watching him, a different kind of challenge in her gaze now. Not one of competition, but of invitation. Aelia extended her hand. Come with me, she whispered. Beyond the stars. See the universe. Compete in the Intergalactic Gaming Tournament. Play against the greatest minds and warriors from every corner of the cosmos. And maybe, something more? Kael looked down at her outstretched hand. For a moment, he hesitated. Earth was all he had ever known. His room. His rig. His daily grind. It was safe. Familiar. But then he thought about the battle they had just fought. The thrill. The rush of pushing past his limits. The idea that somewhere out there, among the stars, there was more, something bigger. Something worth leaving everything behind for. He exhaled, a slow grin creeping onto his face. I've always wanted to see the galaxy. Aelia's smile widened. Their fingers touched, and the room vanished into light. Kael felt his body pulled into the cosmos, weightless, as the world of Earth faded behind him. Stars stretched into endless spirals. Space bent and shifted around them. He was no longer just a gamer. He was stepping into a future he never imagined. A future of legendary battles. A love beyond the stars. A flash of blue light engulfed Kael. Weightlessness. His body felt like it was being stretched across the universe, yet there was no pain, only an exhilarating rush, like riding a roller coaster through the stars. His gaming chair. His bedroom. Earth itself. All of it vanished. Then, with a sudden hum, gravity returned. The world around him solidified, and he staggered slightly before regaining his balance. Kael gasped. He was standing on a floating city in space. Vortex Prime, the capital of champions. Towering crystal spires shimmered under a sky that wasn't a sky at all, but a nebula-filled expanse, where distant planets and moons drifted lazily in the void. Starships zipped between colossal neon billboards, displaying advertisements in alien languages. Some showed gaming highlights, others showcased combat mechs, and one even featured a human-sized energy drink can with an animated tentacle monster giving a thumbs up. Kael's eyes darted to the bustling streets below. He saw beings of every shape and size. Insected creatures with cybernetic limbs. Reptilian warriors draped in sleek battle suits. A group of floating AI-powered drones communicating in a rapid-fire stream of binary. "Welcome to Vortex Prime," Aelia said, stepping beside him. Kael turned to her, his brain still struggling to process everything. This is insane," Aelia chuckled. "You haven't seen anything yet." A marketplace of wonders. She led him down a winding hover platform, passing through a marketplace unlike anything he'd ever seen. Kael's senses were overwhelmed. Vendors sold hovering fruit that shifted flavors depending on how you held them. A four-armed merchant demonstrated cybernetic enhancements, including a neural implant that promised zero reaction time in competitive gaming. Warriors battled in real-time holographic arenas, their digital weapons clashing in bursts of neon energy. Everything around him was a fusion of technology and magic, and Kael felt it, a pulse of raw potential. Then, ahead of them, the grand arena came into view. It was massive. A stadium suspended in space, surrounded by colossal energy rings that crackled with power. Holographic projectors displayed an announcement in the sky, shifting between languages before settling on English. Intergalactic Gaming Tournament. Championship match begins soon. Kael's heartbeat spiked. He turned to Aelia. "Wait, am I playing in this?" Aelia smirked. "That's what I brought you here for. The greatest gamers, tacticians, and warriors in the universe compete here. If you win, you'll be known across the galaxy." Kael swallowed hard. This was more than just a competition, this was the ultimate battleground. But then, Aelia's tone shifted. Softer. "But remember, there's more at stake than just victory. The rival appears." Before Kael could ask what she meant, a thunderous roar echoed across the arena. The massive gates of the Colosseum slid open, and the competitors began to emerge. Kael's eyes widened. Towering insected creatures with cybernetic arms. Reptilian strategists whose minds were rumored to predict every move before it happened. A floating AI entity, its consciousness split into multiple avatars, playing in perfect synchronicity. And then, Dravik the Unbeaten. A 7-foot-tall gladiator, his muscles enhanced with biomechanical plating, stepped forward. His molten gold eyes locked onto Kael with a predatory smirk. One of his hands was a massive mechanical gauntlet, pulsating with raw energy. The crowd fell silent. Kael felt the pressure immediately. Dravik cracked his knuckles, his voice a low, menacing growl. "So, the human finally arrives." Kael's hands clenched into fists. "You know who I am?" Dravik let out a dark chuckle. "I make it a point to know my competition." Then he shot a glance at Aelia, his smirk widening. "You're the one she chose, aren't you?" Kael frowned, glancing at Aelia. "Chose?" Aelia's expression hardened. "This isn't just a tournament," she murmured. It's a battle for more than glory. Dravik stepped closer, his gauntlet crackling with energy. If you win, you prove your place in this galaxy, he said. Then, lowering his voice into something even more dangerous, he added, lose, and you return to Earth as nothing. The weight of the challenge settled on Kael's shoulders. He was no longer just playing for fun. He was playing for something bigger than himself. Aelia turned to him, her gaze firm. Are you ready? Kael took a deep breath, feeling the power of the RTX 5090 enhanced modifications coursing through his setup. Then he smirked. Let's play. The cosmic coliseum erupted with a deafening roar as Kael stepped onto the floating battle platform. His pulse pounded like a war drum, his breath steady but charged with anticipation. Above, massive holoscreens projected his face alongside his opponent, Dravik the Unbeaten. A menacing 7-foot-tall gladiator, his molten eyes gleaming with ruthless confidence. Around them, the stadium pulsed with neon-lit banners, flickering advertisements from across the galaxy, some promoting high-speed cybernetic implants, others featuring energy-enhancing elixirs with slogans like, "Win the game. Win the war." Alien commentators shouted in different languages, their words layered through an advanced universal translation system. Earth's last hope, does he stand a chance? One announcer jeered. Dravik has never been defeated. Will today be any different? Another added, excitement crackling through the audio waves. Kael barely registered them. His focus narrowed, tuned into the moment. Alia's warning. Aelia stood beside him one last time before he entered the arena's activation field. She squeezed his hand. Trust yourself. The RTX 5090 I gave you? It's not just a graphics card here. It's your edge. Kael furrowed his brow. Wait, what do you mean? But before she could answer, the match countdown began. 3, 2, 1. The transformation. A shockwave of energy pulsed through the battlefield. Kael felt a rush, an overload of data flooding his mind. His body glowed with streams of golden light, and suddenly, he was no longer himself. His clothes dissolved into a sleek cybernetic battle suit, form-fitting yet incredibly light. Neural circuits laced through his limbs, his movements now seamlessly connected to an adaptive gaming interface. On his wrist, a tactical HUD flickered to life, displaying System Online. Power source, RTX 5090 Quantum AI processor engaged. Status, combat mode activated. Dravik's first strike. Dravik smirked. Let's see what that toy can do. With a thunderous stomp, he charged forward. His mechanical gauntlet pulsed, then unleashed a gravitational shockwave, warping the air as it tore toward Kael. Instinct took over. Kael rolled to the side, dodging the blast just as the platform beneath him fractured under the attack's force. His mind raced. If this were a game, he would. Wait. This was a game. Kael's fingers twitched instinctively. The suit responded like a controller input. Dodge left. His movements accelerated, sidestepping at hyperspeed. Counterattack. His right gauntlet reshaped, materializing an energy blade. Kael lunged, slashing upward. Dravik barely had time to react. Kael's attack connected, sending him skidding backward. The crowd erupted. A deadly opponent. Dravik wiped a trickle of glowing blue blood from his lip. Then he laughed. Ha! Not bad, for a human. His eyes gleamed. Kael exhaled. This was working. But then. Alert, system overload detected. Warning, unstable power surge. His HUD flickered. The RTX 5090 was drawing too much power. Alia's message. Alia's voice crackled through his comms. Kael, listen! The card isn't just for gaming, it's built for tactical adaptation. Use the battlefield like you would in a match. Kael's eyes darted across the arena, analyzing. Power nodes. Scattered across the floating platforms. Interactive terrain. Elevated cover points. Hazards. Plasma fields that could be used strategically. His gamer instincts kicked in. Kael smirked. It was time to play for real. The battlefield trembled as Dravik charged forward, his plasma gauntlet crackling with raw energy, each punch strong enough to shatter steel. Kael moved on instinct, his gamer reflexes honed through years of play. Dodge. Sidestep. Counter. The fight felt like a rhythm game, each attack a beat, each dodge a perfectly timed input. But Dravik wasn't just a brute. He was adapting. The RTX 5090's AI-enhanced tracking helped Kael predict movements, analyze attack patterns, and react in milliseconds. Yet Dravik caught on. Kael sidestepped one punch too predictably. Dravik feinted, then slammed his gauntlet down. Kael barely managed to block, his energy shield flickering under the strain. Warning, critical damage. Suit integrity at 12%. One final move. Kael's mind raced. He needed to end this. Now. Then it hit him. A finishing move. He had played enough fighting games to know how this worked. The setup. Kael dashed back, pretending to retreat. Dravik took the bait, surging forward, determined to finish the fight. Kael's eyes flicked to the arena's environmental controls. Platform switch, active. He triggered it. With a deep mechanical groan, the floating battlefield shifted. The ground beneath Dravik suddenly tilted. Momentum carried him forward, wide open. The final strike. Kael's suit surged, absorbing every ounce of remaining power. Final strike mode, activated. The gauntlet reshaped, morphing into a hypercharged plasma blade. The crowd held its breath. Dravik's eyes widened. Kael leapt high into the air and brought the finishing blow down. A massive shockwave erupted across the arena, sending ripples of energy surging outward. Silence. Then, victory. When the dust settled, Dravik lay on the ground, defeated. The stadium fell silent. Then, roars of cheering. The announcers screamed into their mics. Unbelievable! The human wins! The moment that changed everything. Kael stood there, panting, his suit flickering as it powered down. He had done it. Alia rushed onto the platform, throwing her arms around him. I knew you could do it! Kael blinked, still in disbelief. Did I just win the Intergalactic gaming tournament? Alia's grin widened. And you didn't just win, Kael, you changed everything. Above them, victory fireworks exploded across the alien skyline, illuminating the universe in electric blues and cosmic purples. Kael turned to Alia. Maybe this was more than just a game. Maybe this was the beginning of something even greater. The cheers of the crowd still echoed through the cosmic arena, the fireworks painting the sky in electric blues and golds. Kael stood on the winner's podium, his breath still heavy, his body aching from the intensity of battle. The RTX 5090 enhanced suit had powered down, but he could still feel the residual energy thrumming in his veins. He had won. But even in victory, something felt off. A hush spread through the crowd as a figure emerged from the shadows. The stranger. Tall, clad in a high-tech suit of obsidian metal, the newcomer exuded a presence beyond anything Kael had felt before. His violet eyes glowed beneath a sleek visor, scanning Kael with an intensity that sent a chill through his spine. You're impressive, Earthling, the figure said, his voice smooth but edged with something Kael couldn't quite place. But the real battle is just beginning. The air grew tense. Alia stepped forward, her expression darkening. Kael, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. We need to talk. A new threat? Kael's pulse quickened. He had just won the biggest tournament in the universe. And yet, looking into the stranger's eyes, he knew. This was only the beginning. Kael's pulse still thundered in his ears from the fight, his muscles aching as the reality of his victory settled in. He barely had time to process the roaring crowd before the mysterious figure stepped forward, his violet eyes gleaming like stars trapped in the abyss. You're more than just a skilled player, the figure said, his voice smooth yet commanding. You adapted. You strategized. You fought like someone who's been training for this their whole life. Kael wiped the sweat from his brow, still catching his breath. And you are? Alia's posture stiffened. Kael, meet Commander Zyros of the Celestial Vanguard. The name carried weight. Even without knowing what it meant, Kael felt the shift in the air. The crowd around them seemed distant now, like background noise in a moment too big to comprehend. Celestial Vanguard? Kael echoed. Alia nodded, her face unreadable. They're not just warriors. They don't just play games. They fight in real battles. Kael let out a short, disbelieving laugh. Wait. What do you mean, real battles? Zyros smirked, and with a flick of his wrist, a massive holographic projection ignited in the air. The stadium's bright lights dimmed as the image expanded, a sprawling map of the galaxy, filled with flashing red zones, orbital stations under siege, and colossal space fleets clashing in battle. The cheers of the crowd faded into an eerie silence as Kael's eyes locked onto the scene before him. A world burning. A massive dreadnought splitting apart under a relentless barrage of plasma fire. Entire civilizations collapsing into ruin. His stomach churned. What is this? Alia's voice was softer this time. The real war, Kael. He turned to face her, searching for some hint of a joke. But there was none. The tournament was never just about competition, she continued. It was a test. A way to find warriors who could handle the impossible. And you, she placed a hand on his arm, just proved you're one of them. Kael took a step back. No, hold on a second. I'm just a gamer. I don't know anything about. Zyros interrupted, his tone unwavering. Your mind does. The RTX 5090's quantum AI allowed you to process combat at speeds beyond normal human capability. You think like a strategist. You see patterns before they form. You outmaneuvered Dravik, not just because you were fast, but because you were smarter. Kael clenched his fists. It wasn't wrong. He had felt it. The battle hadn't just been about reflexes, it had been about reading the game, adapting, controlling the map. Just like he had done 1,000 times before. But this was different. This wasn't a game. This was war. He shook his head. I got lucky out there. No, Alia whispered. You didn't. Silence stretched between them. Then Kael exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. And what happens if I say no? Zyros didn't hesitate. Then you return to Earth. Back to your life. Back to your streams. Back to a world where none of this ever mattered. The words stung more than Kael expected. None of this ever mattered. His hands curled into fists. For years, gaming had been his escape. His purpose. The one thing that made him feel alive. Now, for the first time, it felt like it had led him somewhere. His gaze drifted to Alia. The woman who had changed his life. The woman who had believed in him before he had even understood why. Alia stepped closer, her voice softer now. No matter what happens, I'll be with you. Kael stared at the holomap, at the flickering red zone labeled Sector Omega, a place where something far worse was waiting. He took a deep breath. Then, he met Zyros' gaze. All right, he said. A small smile touched the commander's lips. Then, Kael. He extended a gloved hand. Welcome to the real game. The map zoomed in, the red zone pulsing like a warning beacon in the void. Kael reached out and accepted the invitation. Game on. The moment Kael said yes, his world shifted. He had spent years inside battle simulations, memorizing strategies, pushing his reflexes to the limit. But this wasn't a game anymore. Now, he wasn't just a competitor. He was a recruit. A surge of energy coursed through him as a high-tech exosuit snapped into place around his body, sleek, adaptive armor designed for intergalactic warfare. The suit's neural uplinks fused with his nervous system, sending streams of real-time combat data directly to his mind. And at the core of it all? His RTX 5090, now fully integrated, no longer just a piece of hardware, but the beating heart of his combat interface. Kael flexed his fingers, feeling the power humming through his body. Every movement felt sharper, faster, like he was seeing the world in ultra-high frame rate. Then, the Celestial Vanguard's warship loomed into view. Massive. Sleek. Alive with cosmic energy as its quantum engines thrummed, glowing like captured supernovas. The vessel drifted through space like a predator hunting in the void. Kael barely had time to take it all in before Commander Zyros led them aboard. The ship's interior was a war machine in motion, dozens of alien warriors, strategists, and AI tacticians working in perfect sync as they monitored a holotable filled with shifting battle data. Aelia walked beside him, her gaze sharp, but beneath it all, Kael could feel her tension. She nudged him. "You ready for this?" Kael smirked. "No. But when has that ever stopped me?" Zyros stood at the head of the command deck, staring at the holographic map as hostile fleet markers flashed in deep red. Then he turned to Kael. "Let's see if you're really ready." A sudden warning alarm blared through the ship. "Warning, incoming hostile force detected." "Warning." Kael's HUD exploded with combat notifications. Enemy warships, 12. Dreadnought-class vessels, 2. Power fluctuations detected, new unknown energy signatures. Kael's grin widened. The final level had just begun. Kael's fingers curled around the neural controls inside his exosuit, feeling the raw energy coursing through his body. His RTX 5090 enhanced interface linked directly to his brain, translating his thoughts into precise, real-time movements. He wasn't just reacting. He was connected, to the suit, to the ship, to the battlefield itself. And now, he was about to step into his first real war. From the command bridge of the Celestial Vanguard warship, Kael watched as the void of space twisted and fractured. From the darkness, a fleet of enemy fighters emerged, sleek, jagged war machines bristling with plasma cannons and ion disruptors. They moved in perfect, synchronized formations. The Void-born Armada.